All right, welcome everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order for the Corporation of Township of Putzlich on March 1st, 2023. I will start with roll call. Councilor first. President. Councilor Goida.
Present.
Councilor Zapoulis. And Councilor Bailey.
Present.
Good. Now begin our moment of reflection. That concludes our moment of reflection. Ms. Whitebox, you have a resolution for confirmation of the agenda, please.
The council approves the March 1st, 2023 agenda and addendum as circulated, and the council approves the additions to the agenda as follows. Consent item 6.1.4, questions received from council seeking additional information in the corresponding responses provided by staff.
You take a move for that. Councilor Hurst, second Councilor Willis. Any questions or comments on this addendum? All right, all in favor? It's carried. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. Councilor Guida?
Yeah, I am declaring for item 10.6, which is the Ontario Divisional Court decision and found in the County of Wellington. And it is due to a family member owning a gravel pit in the County of Wellington. Therefore, I have a pecuniary interest in the assessment of gravel pits.
Thank you. Any further? All right, then we can just move into delegations. Scheduled for 10:05, so I'll invite Guy up to the table.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, thank you to members of the Council and the Township's Integrity Commissioner as appointed by bylaw number 2022-15 for a term ending the last day of April 2023. As a lawyer, the areas in which I practice are conflict of interest, government ethics, and government transparency. Most integrity commissioners have a general municipal background. I think I'm the only one whose background relates specifically to what the integrity commissioner is supposed to do, conflict of interest and ethics. My firm makes my services available at a fraction of my regular fees. I serve as an integrity commissioner not for the money, but to give back to communities by making services available to municipalities. Around the province, you'll see some integrity commissioners charging fees in the tens of thousands of dollars, the hundreds of thousands of dollars. The township should know, and residents should know, that since 2018, the average cost of my services before tax is less than $96 per month. And the township is behind more than $1,300 or more than $1,500 plus tax and payments. Like I said, it's not about the money. An integrity commissioner is an officer of the municipality, an accountability officer. The office is created by the Municipal Act. An officer is not the same as a contractor or a consultant, like someone you might hire to work on your computers or to renovate this community center. An officer holds an office established by legislation and exercises duties and functions established in legislation. And an officer is appointed, not hired, not engaged in a contract. Section 223.3 of the Municipal Act makes clear an integrity commissioner is, quote, appointed, end quote. Now, some people are confused about how an integrity commissioner is appointed. Does the municipality contract an integrity commissioner like you contract a road repair? No, an integrity commissioner is appointed and appointments are effected by bylaw. Subsection 5.3 of the Municipal Act makes very clear that municipal power shall be exercised by bylaw. So why am I here? Item 12.1.1 on today's agenda is a proposal to repeal bylaw 2022-15. It's a draft bylaw, and the last line of that draft bylaw says that bylaw number 2022-15 is hereby repealed. If that passes today, my term as integrity commissioner will end today, 2 months before the expiry provided in bylaw number 2022-15. So what's the issue? In my view, there are 3 issues. 1, transparency; 2, fairness; and 3, compliance with the Municipal Act. First, transparency. Appointment of an accountability officer is a special situation because an accountability officer is selected by council, yet at the same time an accountability officer holds council members accountable. It's a delicate situation. That's why most municipalities make the selection as transparently as possible. What do most municipalities do? They make public the fact that they're looking for an integrity commissioner. They publish the criteria, so everybody can see the basis for evaluation. They include in the agenda package, the open session agenda package, a report that provides reasons for the recommendation. And in fact, that is what happened when I was appointed. I refer you to the most recent report, ADM 2022-19, about me, which was transparently considered in open session. In short, when they appoint an accountability officer at a municipality, most municipalities in Ontario practice accountability. They make it transparent. None of that is happening here. I have served for 5 years without issue. The proposal before council is to repeal my appointment today, 2 months before the appointment expires. No reason is given. The bylaw removes an integrity commissioner in midterm before it's expired by repealing the bylaw appointment. The public is receiving no explanation and no justification. Unlike other municipalities, and in fact, unlike this township before, there is no explanation. Everything's clouded in secrecy. Members of the public may ask, why are council members so anxious that they can't wait until April 30th when my bylaw ends? They may ask, what are council members planning to do over the next 2 months that they don't want the current integrity commissioner to oversee? They may ask why all the deliberation has taken place in secret when the common practice of municipalities is to announce in public you're looking for an accountability, to publish the criteria in public, and to consider the selection report in an open session. Now, I'm not asking those questions, but your residents very well might. An officer of the township, an officer whose job is to hold council members accountable, has served without issue for 5 years, and councillors met in closed session to decide to get rid of the officer 2 months before the term ends with no reason. If a municipal council wants to get rid of an accountability officer, it must do so with accountability. That means transparently. The second issue is fairness. I'm an officer of the township. I am not just an IT consultant. I'm an officer of the township appointed under the Municipal Act. But I am also independent of the township. I'm not an employee of the township. That means I do not have employment protection. The Supreme Court of Canada says a special rule applies when a municipal government seeks to remove an officer who lacks employment protection. Before terminating the appointment, the appointing body, the council, must provide procedural fairness, specifically notice and an opportunity to be heard. That rule only applies to office holders without employment protection or similar protection. In other words, an office holder like me. In a case called Dunsmuir against New Brunswick, the Supreme Court referred to situations like this one, in which the terms of appointment of some public office holders expressly provide for summary dismissal, or at the very least are silent on the matter, in which case office holders may be deemed to hold office at pleasure, like an integrity commissioner. In such a case, the Supreme Court of Canada said, quote, procedural fairness is required to ensure that public power is not exercised capriciously. Nobody doubts the right of municipality to remove an integrity commissioner. What the Supreme Court of Canada said is, because you can do whatever you want, you're required to act in a manner that's procedurally fair. Notice and reasons and a chance to be heard. Notice and a hearing go together. The office holder needs notice of the reasons to be able to respond meaningfully. I've never been given the reasons. I'm as much in the dark as every resident of the township. So I can't respond. I have nothing to respond to. That's why you must, if you wish to pass the bylaw on the agenda today, do what the Supreme Court of Canada says. You must act fairly, which means notifying me of the reasons, then giving me a chance to respond to those reasons. Now, the staff will say something about the contract, and it is true. There's a bylaw of appointment, and underneath that bylaw, there is a contract. But the bylaw is on top, and the contract is underneath. And that's key. The bylaw prevails. So the contract is not relevant to what I'm saying for 4 reasons. First of all, integrity commissioners aren't appointed by the contract. They're appointed by the bylaw. Under Section 5 of the Municipal Act, the bylaw, not the contract, constitutes your decision. B, the contract doesn't provide the protection mentioned by the Supreme Court of Canada. The Supreme Court of Canada says when there's not this protection, yet the duty to treat the officer fairly applies. Your contract doesn't provide any protection, therefore the duty to treat me fairly still applies. C, you're not following the contract anyway. Repealing my appointment today, which is the bylaw before you, is not consistent with the wording of the contract anyway. And finally, the existence of this contract doesn't address the issues of secrecy. and lack of transparency that I have raised. And the practice of openness and transparency that you previously practiced, but aren't today. The third point I want to make is that the draft bylaw of 12 and agenda item 12.1.1 would bring you out of compliance with municipal act. Section 223.3 of the Act requires that you either have an integrity commissioner or another commissioner providing those functions. So you need your own integrity commissioner, or you need somebody else's to provide functions. The bylaw on the agenda takes effect the date of passage today. And it states that bylaw number 2022-15 is repealed today. That means that my appointment would be repealed today, and you won't have an integrity commissioner as of today. In fact, if this bylaw passes, you won't have an integrity commissioner for another 9 days. And in the meantime, you won't have anybody providing those functions. So the municipality will be in default of the municipal act for 9 days. And your reasons for choosing to go into default are secret. Indeed, residents might wonder, what is council planning to do for the next 9 days that it doesn't want to have any integrity commissioner at all? Now, I'm not asking that, but when council acts secretly and without transparently, you invite those questions from residents. I sent some of these comments down in a letter dated February 10th. And I sent it to the clerk's attention because that's the protocol. Communications to council go to the clerk for council. Remember that the line of reporting is from the integrity commissioner to the council. The integrity commissioner does not report to the staff. But for some reason, you were never given my February 10th letter, and I don't see it in the agenda package today. That's a serious matter, because there shouldn't be any interference between communication from the integrity commissioner reports to the council to the integrity commissioner reports. Now, I don't think that was a deliberate, malfeasance. I really think it's all part of a misunderstanding on the part of the township. Misunderstanding of the role of an officer, an office holder, how officers are appointed by bylaw, and how the law works. I hope that my presentation cleared up this misunderstanding about what an appointment is and how it works. Bylaw 2022-15, which council passed, says my role as your integrity commissioner ends in 2 months. If you want to end the appointment early by repealing the bylaw, then you owe it to the residents of the township to be fully transparent. Give them reasons, an explanation why you want to remove the person who holds you accountable. On something this fundamental related to your own accountability, you cannot act unaccountably. You can't act untransparently. And also, you must follow the rule laid down by the Supreme Court of Canada in the Dunsmuir and New Brunswick case. You've got to give the integrity commissioner, that is me, notice of your reasons and an opportunity to be heard. I thank you for your time. I thank you for letting me go about a minute over time.
Well, thank you for your presentation. It was well done, and right now I'll ask council if they need any clarification or any questions for delegate. Okay, thank you very much. Well, I will say one thing. Whatever happens going forward, I want to thank you for your service. And it wasn't lost on me that when we had inquiries to you, that there was a short time frame. Our agendas are posted on a Wednesday-ish, and sometimes Friday. And then we have to contact you and get a turnaround relatively quickly. And that won't change for the integrity commissioner going forward. But again, I appreciate that service for the last number of years.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you.
Resolution.
The council receives the delegation for information.
Get a member for that, please. Councilor Spillos, seconded by Councilor Bailey. All in favor? And I believe we're on to consent. Agenda. All right, so if I say resolution consent agenda, please.
That the consent agenda items for the March 1st, 2023 council meeting be received for information.
Mover for that. Councilor Spillos, seconded by Councilor Hurst. Any items wish to be removed for that one? I'll go in order with see who's first. Okay, Councilor Spillos.
Yes, items 6, 7, 6, 8, and 6.9.
Okay. Councilor Bailey.
Yeah, I hit those as well, and 6.5.
All right, so we can receive the remainder of those. Right, all in favor of receiving the remainder of those? Councilor Spillos, is it okay if I go with Councilor Bailey since it's 6.5, just to go?
Sure, absolutely, yes.
All right, Councilor Bailey, 6.5.
Yeah, I had made note of it as well in the questions to staff, but I had noticed on the work plan that's on the agenda that there's indication that there's going to be collaboration with the county of Wellington to develop a cannabis policy. So I just thought we should be maybe adding this to our file and or sharing it with the county.
Staff want to comment further on what was responded in the minutes? Sorry, thoughts?
Certainly, for you, Mr. Chair, staff acknowledged that this is a good piece of information and we are going to include it in our file for that corporate work plan item and use it as for information purposes going forward.
Okay, excellent. I maybe have a comment or a question for Ms. Hassan. When we initially passed, I believe it'd be a bylaw when we permitted cannabis operations within the township, we were to receive funding from the province. It's a profit sharing. Has that been happening? I haven't made notice of it in our budget. So we received payments from the province around the
Yes.
cannabis?
Yes, we did. A couple years ago, we did receive all the payments that we were required to receive under that program.
Was that program completed now, or I felt it was an annual payment that we would receive based on household? Or
I do believe it was completed based on the correspondence that we received from the province. I believe the funds were received over a couple of years.
So it wasn't in perpetuity, the funding, it was just for the initial number of years, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, that's too bad. Okay. All right, so we can just receive that one.
And I've made note, through you, Mr. Chair, in the resolution, just that we include this in the file for future information.
Okay, do we need to get the word a seconder for that? All right, I'm gonna move that, Councillor Bailey, seconded by Councillor Guida. Any questions or comments before we? Okay, all in favor? All right, that's carried. Councillor Spillis.
Yes, I'd like to propose a motion with respect to item 6.7, 6.8, and 6.9. Basically, motion reads where the Township Postage Council has received correspondence from the towns of Deep River, Essex, and Clinton, Wyoming, advising that the respective councils support the resolution from Petro regarding school board elections. And whereas in the province of Ontario, municipalities are responsible to conduct election processes on behalf of school boards. And whereas that extensive amounts of resources, time, and management to advertise, coordinate, and complete these trustee elections is placed on municipality. And whereas municipality did not receive any compensation reimbursement for orchestration of the school board trustee elections. Be resolved that the Township Position Council also is in support and request staff to forward this motion to the Honorable Stephen Lecce, Minister of Education, Speaker Ted Arnott, Amo, Roma, and the County of Wellington requesting the school board become responsible for conducting the old trustee elections or a minimum municipality be compensated by school boards for overseeing such trustee elections. So my concern is our taxpayers are paying for something that I don't think they should be paying for. Everybody contributes to the Board of Education. If you look at our makeup of the taxes, that the school boards are getting same amount of tax or a bit more than what we do. So I think it's appropriate that any costs incurred by them, by us, I should say, related to trustees, should be at least covered by them. They can hold their own elections or piggyback onto our elections, or wherever the case may be.
So that's a moved motion. Can I get a seconder so we can discuss that, please? Councillor Guida. Okay. Councillor Hurst.
Yeah, I think Councillor Spillis makes a good point. In reading the briefing notes, I was somewhat shocked that there wasn't a degree of compensation to the municipality to undertake the elections. I think, you know, my feelings moving forward would be is that there's well-established infrastructure within the municipality to undertake elections. The whole process, and I think it's very worthwhile to approach the Minister of Education to seek some cost share funding to undertake this. In the absence of that, they can hold their own elections. But I think this issue is larger than this township too. So I think, you know, the key piece moving forward is to make sure that there's an aligned message with all the municipalities on this issue. I'm supportive.
Okay. Councillor Guida.
Yeah, I'm supportive as well. I would say that I agree with what Councillor Hurst has just said. It's a process that's already in place and it works well, and that would be probably ideally the best way to go and have compensation for it. But all else fails, they can hold their own, but I mean, ultimately, I think best outcome would be that the election still proceeds one election in one place at one time. But there's a cost sharing involved, but failing that, then yes, they can use their own, and I support the motion.
Really?
Thank you. Yeah, my reason for pulling it out was more to gather some information before moving something forward like this. If we're talking a few $100s does it cost the municipality, then I don't know if it's worth, making a big deal of it, if it's a big cost. And again, like Councilor Hirsch said, it's bigger than just this municipality. It would be more costly in other townships, I'm sure. But so I didn't know if there was opportunity from staff to gather some of the data and maybe try to put a value on what we would be looking for compensation for. Staff had comment on that.
You want to speak to that?
If council wants to do that, we could spend some time putting that together. So if you want to maybe.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, I think it's difficult to determine the amount that we put towards the school board elections versus the municipal elections, simply because they're so, it's such a one process. I think that we have some areas that we could pinpoint, like our ballot bases, needing to print multiple versions of those for the various school boards. That's certainly something, but because it's such a combined process. And it's all our staff, it's all our funds, really hosting all of it. It's difficult to say what we think that amount that is put towards the school boards would be. But we can look at it a little bit closer to try to find what that amount would be. I mean, it's also challenging too, and we put in some of the notes to in the staff responses to the questions. I know there was some situations in the county of Wellington where they had offices that were fully acclaimed. That doesn't preclude them from having to go through the election at that point, because they are hosting the school board elections. So I think it's also depending on what happens during the campaign period and what that election is going to look like. But we can try to come up with a number of what that would look like. But again, it would be a little bit tough.
Yeah, and just if I can follow up, that's a little bit of my concern with what we're asking for. So if we're saying, hey, we would like some compensation, but we don't know what that looks like, and we can't actually put a percent on what we're looking for, then it kind of makes our ask not super solid. So I think we would just need a little bit of information before putting some sort of.
So if I can interject, I think the first step is the correspondence with the minister. And if we get confirmation from the minister that they're willing to look at, allowing us to recoup costs, then we can start diving into it deeper to do our costs. But it could be something that staff work with the board to negotiate, some costs, because it is going to be difficult to get a concrete number. But I mean, there's definitely some hard costs, but then it's similar when we do the cost sharing with neighbor municipality for a staff position, right? There's always a little bit extra to make it, anyways, there's a negotiation point there. So at this stage, I think it's pretty preliminary, and we can wait to see if we can see any response. It's something we have 3 years, we could keep on our radar and, maybe bring up a year or two from now when we're getting closer to the election, especially since then we'll know if the minister is actually entertaining allowing us that vehicle to cost recovery. Become black, Councilor Daly.
Just a quick comment to Councilor Bailey. A quick and dirty way of doing it is base it on a number of candidates. You've got 10 candidates, 5 from here and 5 from there, split it down the middle. We get entirely acclaimed council, well, then all the costs go to them. So that's my suggestion.
Until we're allowed to do cost recovery, I just don't want staff spending a ton of time on. So let's wait till we hear if we get a response. Councilor Hirsch,
Yeah, I'm supportive of a two-step process here. I think the first one is to approach the minister with a request. My suggestion on staff, and I think Councillor Sepoulis is in the same headspace as mine. I kind of look at it as in the last election, you have in this township, you have the mayor, 4 councillors and two school board trustees for Catholic and public. So to me, that's a rough ratio that you can work out. And maybe as part of that initial correspondence, I think the reality is different municipalities have different cost structures in running elections, so that's quite difficult to navigate, but maybe as a starting point, just work out the ratio and say, here's what the last election or last 3 elections cost, here's a ratio, and start with that, just to give an idea of what the number may be without getting into the specifics. But I think my only suggestion would be is in the school board budget cycle, that's probably a discussion that we would want to have in 2 years' time, not in 3 years' time, so that if that commitment is the case, it can get embedded into the various school board budget cycles as opposed to after the fact. So that would be my only comments. I mean, very supportive.
It just dawned on me, why don't we ask the school board if they're willing to compensate us, even without the minister telling them to compensate us? Maybe there's an appetite at the school board, because our total cost was, you say 65,000? Even at half, it's a $30,000 bill per year on a $100 million budget or more, whatever the school board. I don't know how tight their ship is, but I feel there's at least ask them and see if they'd entertain the conversation and staff would engage. Want to add that to the motion, to need a motion, they have added to the motion to take that direction.
I can add that in there, but I would think that the Minister of Education calls the SHAR in this particular case. It's not us.
I'm not saying don't do that, but just give staff direction to contact the board and see if they're willing to pay it.
It's one of the CEO.
I suspect that the Board of Education would simply respond and say that, well, that's what legislation is, so we're just following legislation.
We're successful on the sidewalk. They did some improvements there, cost sharing. I don't know if they're absolutely,
Yeah, but that was physical
Okay.
infrastructure to help the
it was
kids.
just, I'm fine with it. Status quo. Further comments?
I was gonna wait till after, but I did reach out to Catherine Hauser, so she's the school board trustee for our area. She didn't have anything to note. She couldn't find any information on the expense for anything, which isn't surprising. But she has forwarded this on to the Director of Education and the Chair of the board locally. So that's been done just through that avenue.
Maybe just to make your point, I think the communication channel probably should go to the Minister of Education, but I don't see the downside of CCing our local school boards as in that correspondence. I think that would be a respectful way of approaching it.
Also, I wrote down and I forgot, MPP Matthew Ray. He represents geographically half of Wellington County. Maybe not by population, so I'd appreciate it. I'd like to start engaging that MPP more. Because as Mr. Arnott is Speaker of the House, he's not permitted to speak in, advocate in the House, and he's also not part of the caucus. So there may be a possibility that MPP Ray would be able to give a bit of a voice for Wellington County taxpayers.
Sure, also determined my motion to include MPP Gray and also the 2 school boards that will deal with this final board.
Who seconded that? Good. Anything further? All in favor? All right, great. I believe that completes consent agendas. Items. Great, we're on to public meetings. Correct. All right, we have a public meeting, March 22nd, 2023 at 7 p.m. Public information meeting held in person at 23 Brock Road South and by electronic participation through Zoom regarding the following matter. Proposed zoning bylaw amendment D14/WEL Wellington Motor Freight, 128 Brock Road South, Bussage. That's here. Correct. Great. Reports. We are on to admin reports. Let me just get it on my computer. So 9.3.1. Mr. CAO.
Thank you. Yes, this is the corporate work plan that we've put together, taking into consideration the items identified by council as their goals and objectives for the term of council, as well as what was approved in the budget, and also items included by the various department heads based on budget items, legislative items, those types of things. So it's an ambitious work plan for sure compared to last year. So it'll be a very, very busy year for everyone involved. So we appreciate your understanding in advance as we're going through this. We'll get to this, get as much of this completed as we possibly can. There may be a few challenges. I just highlight that if some additional urgent matters come up during the year, some of these might have to get bumped because there's only so much time available for everybody, right? So we'll do our best. But if there's any specific questions on specific items, the majority of our department heads are connected here, so they can speak to the specifics. We'll do our best to answer any questions you might have.
Can I get you to read the resolutions?
That report ADM 2023-010 regarding the proposed 2023 report plan be received, and that council directs staff to proceed with finalizing the document either as presented or as amended and report back to council.
All right, in order for that, please. Mr. Willis, second by Councilor Boyd. Questions? Sir Hurst?
Yeah, well, a comment and a question. I think, as a new counselor, I quite appreciate the level of detail in going through this. I just need a magnifying glass to see the small font here, but so I appreciate the time and effort that staff put into it. I guess my one question would be is if there are any amendments to the work plan over the course of the calendar year, what's the process for updating the work plan, making council available to understand if there are any amendments over the course of the calendar year? And I totally realize that things happen and some things progress faster and others don't. That was really what I was looking for, is just some explanation of it. Is the intention to present this to council at the 6-month mark or the 3-month, 6-month, 9-month, so on and so forth, for some understanding of the direction, and then tease out any particular changes that may have happened over the course of the calendar year. That's it.
Sure, I can speak to that. This is a living document that we as the leadership team utilize. We have, this council is aware, we have leadership calls once a week for a short period of time. We'll get together on a call and just go over the items that are currently happening, take a quick review of the work plan to see if anything's changing, if there's a project is complete or delayed or whatever, so we adjust it that way. So there are little adjustments made on a regular basis. But what we plan on doing as well is giving you like a mid-year update to kind of say, okay, here we are halfway through the year. Here's what we adjusted. Here's what's completed. Here's what we suggest we defer to next year. So not that we're coming to you constantly, have to move this out 2 weeks or bring it back a month or something. We'll give you a review at the mid-year point and see how we're going. And then if there's major things that change, again, a big project comes up or a big one is delayed for whatever reason, we would bring that to you on a one-off basis, but generally we'll do the mid-year review.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, this is a document that's been in place for, I think this is 3 years now. But every time I look at it, I am just super impressed with the sheer volume of projects that are on the go. And I think that this is a great document, not only for council and staff, but also it's something to show the public to, these are all of the things that we as council and staff are working on. And I agree with the CAO. It's very ambitious, a ton of work on the go. So I don't have any specific questions, but I'm supportive of the plan and thanks for all the hard work in putting it together.
Councilor Willis?
Yes, I'm supportive of the plan. I have 3 questions. So first item is, can we consider asking staff to select a gravel road and do the design this year as part of the program? Is that appropriate to ask staff to do so? I know a consultant recommended Carter Road and in that area as well. It's also a local road. I was wondering if our staff have different criteria that would make more sense, so perhaps it's something that needs a lot easier, a lot expensive, less expensive to get on and get another road and I should have put it done next few years.
Well, we're bringing forward the roads management plan in the very near future. It's going to be outlining the criteria of the roads that are closest available. So council could wait to see that, unless Mr. Fowler, if you have any specific comment or suggestions. You know, last time we did go ahead and do one in advance of the report because it was so draft. We're hopefully close to finalizing it, so we could do it either way. Mr. Fowler, maybe you have some comment?
Morning, council. Yes, we've been identifying a couple gravel roads that would be up next for consideration. I guess the challenge would be that we're not running into the same type of road width and some base that we had with the luxury of concession 7. So there are a number of crunchy comments currently
You're breaking up, Mr.
to
Fowler.
address the sub-base conditions before we can even discuss paving. Can you hear me better? Is that better, Mr. Mayor?
Might have to restate that. It was pretty broken, Mr. Fowler. I caught most of it, but you and I have had quite a few conversations on it, so sorry about that. If you don't mind just trying to restate that, please.
Yeah, my apologies. Can you hear me better?
So far, yeah.
Okay, it just says my internet's unstable. I guess I'll start from the beginning. Currently, we have a couple gravel roads that are up next for consideration of paving. After review with our engineers, the cost will be considerably a little bit higher due to sub-base and road widening that will match our current road requirements to pave. At this time, we are hoping to have a road identified for the fall of this year for consideration moving forward.
So you're saying, Mr. Fowler, that you don't have anything in mind now, and if you have a road in the fall, does that mean you get the design done this year, or you're gonna move it into next year?
Once the numbers for sub-base reconstruction have been reviewed, then a road can be presented, and the intent would be for the budget cycle for next year to be considered.
Yeah, I guess my concern is, you design and you construct, so we leave the design till next year. You're not gonna be able to get any construction started next year. They're gonna be going into 2 years from now. So my concern is, we've got the opportunity this year to do the design, and even if we have to save it or break it up for construction in 2 phases because of the cost, I think it'd be more appropriate to get something started this year. I don't know how the rest feel.
I do agree with you, Councillor Sepoulis. The reluctancy with some of the engineers are just due to the, we'll say, the cost pressures of inflation currently, is that they are reluctant to give numbers that could be not reflected the same in the next couple of years. So it's a scenario where the current costs that would be provided this year may not reflect, say, a year to 2 years out.
If I could interject a turn. What I'm hearing is Councilor Spoulis would, and I'm supportive of it, is have a determination from staff on a road by the fall or sooner. That design work could happen over the winter and the final costing be brought before the 24 construction period. Right? Because we could do a pre-budget approval. There's a few avenues to consider it. But we just don't want the costing and the design work to be starting in the fiscal year 24. So I guess I feel that's what I'm hearing is having staff report back on a road, either with that road plan if it comes in a timely manner, or outside of that by the fall, so then we can get design criteria and then come the new year, get some costing. Everything I've been hearing, even at the county level, is like putting out early tenders. You get favorable pricing.
Absolutely.
So-
Mayor, absolutely. That's my reason for putting the pressure on for your tendering in the winter months. Be all the pressure. As soon as you start tendering in the spring, that they already got the job commitments on the contractors that have the numbers get jacked up before.
So I guess that's the question, Mr. Fallon, Mr. CEO is maybe more statement now. Don't delay choosing a road just for the purpose of the plan.
Right.
And bring it to council's considerations. Mr. Fallon, did you want to add anything to that before I go around the table again?
No, I understood. Once a road is identified, though, it will be, the cost breakdown will be provided, and then a couple options will be then given to council for council to decide on which road they would like to proceed with.
Sounds good.
I made, I've got a couple other items. I don't know if I need a motion on this item or you okay.
I'll get a motion and I'll let the other councilors just,
I got two other items.
are they the same?
No, they're different.
So let's just deal with this one and I'll come back to you.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, so then we'll take that as a motion. Can I get a second, please? And one council. Mr. Guida, okay, Mr. Hurst. Mr. Guida. Okay, so all in favor on that one? After one, okay. You want to read it out? You can repeat your motion, please.
Yeah, that staff could look at selecting a gravel road to commence design this year. And the funding is available undertake construction next year to take advantage of favorable inspection prices like pending.
You move that, you moved it, who seconded it? Final comments before you vote on that? Favor? Schools?
Now, two items, pickleball lines at Warren Park, are they included anywhere in the task? Was that something to be budgeted for next year?
The pickleball lines were identified for this year's budget cycle, and it is currently slated to be installed in the week of May the 14th of this year.
This is at Warren Park, correct?
Sorry, no, this is not Boren Park. Boren Park, and that will be determined once the final tender for the Boren Park construction. We will utilize one of the contractors to install pickleball lines at the time.
Okay, fair enough. The last item is the lighting at the PCC parking lot. Is that included in there, or is that an item for next year's budget?
Just currently awaiting figures from the photometrics that were taken for the PCC, and the plan is to have it included in this year's budget.
Great, thank you.
Great. We'd have to receive that, of course.
Yes, we have to receive it if you presented it.
Okay. Councilor Bailey, you have a quick comment?
I just had one question more for CEO, because this is a live document like you referred to. Will it be accessible for us to see on a shared drive? Yeah,
Yeah, put it on share, so you
Okay.
can see the spread version.
perfect. Thank
Can I,
you.
can I expand on that? Can it be accessible to the public? Like on the website?
We'll have a way to come up with something for that.
So it'd be nice if we get critiqued on certain things to be able to point to what staff are working on, what's coming in the future. I think that, you know, it's and a magnifying glass, but other than that.
We'll find a way to incorporate something.
Okay, perfect, thanks. All right, any other comments on the work plan? Any amendments? So we have one second.
We don't, and it's to receive it as presented.
That's presented, correct? Well, the road thing,
I have that separately.
so we're good.
Yes, we're
All right, can I get a mover to receive that as presented, please? Councilor Goyda, seconded by Councilor Bailey. All in favor? Carried. All right, next is the Heritage Advisory Committee. It's Justine, she is here. Welcome, Deputy Clerk.
Thank you.
How are
Thank you,
today?
Mr. Mayor. I'm good. Okay, I'm here today to present to council report to seek direction regarding an appointment to fill a vacancy on the Heritage Advisory Committee. Because the vacancy occurred shortly after recruitment completion, and given that the committee has not yet met, staff recommend that the vacancy be filled by reviewing applications submitted during the initial recruitment period. Based on this review, staff recommend that Mr. Josh Heller be appointed to the Heritage Advisory Committee effective March 1st, 2023, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Mover for that, please. Councilor Goyette, second by Councilor Hurst. All right, any comments, questions, Councilor Hurst? No. Anybody else? Councilor Willis?
Yeah, is Mr. Josh Heller on side?
Yeah, did you ask him?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
My question.
Any other questions? Okay, all in favor? Very great job, Deputy Clerk.
Thank you.
All right, I think that's it. All right, 9.3.3. This White Box.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, this is a report following up on a delegation that we received from a resident in May last year. It was related to his pond on his private property, and he was looking for the township to do some review related to the adjacent aggregate operation. So at the time, staff were limited in information that we were able to have our hydrogeologist review because we weren't provided access to the annual monitoring reports. So this report just details that we were successful in accessing those records through a Freedom of Information request. The monitoring report was reviewed by our hydrogeologist, and he's provided a summary for council, which is attached to this report. And so staff at this time are really looking to receive this for information purposes, and we can provide this to the residents as well. It hasn't been provided at this time, but just for his information. And further, if this is something that council would like staff to access on an annual basis, it would likely need to be done through a Freedom of Information request. We can certainly do that. We would just need to make note of that each year to take on that process.
Okay. You'll read the resolution.
That report ADM 2023-012 entitled 2020 monitoring report for Lafarge McMillan Pit license number 10671 and peer review be received, and that council direct staff to forward the staff report schedules to Mr. Wade Madden, who was the resident requesting the information.
Okay, move for that, please. Councilor Hurst, second by Councilor Bailey. All right, comments, questions, Councilor Hurst?
I was just curious if staff is recommending to seek this information on an annual basis as part of a larger monitoring program, or is this process been completed at this point? Or to be determined, this was.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's a good question. Our hydrogeologist didn't raise any major concerns when he reviewed the report, but the area where this is located, there's a number of pits. So there is potentially value in getting this information on an annual basis. The cost is quite low. I think it was a $5 request and $7.50 to actually receive it. So the cost really is immaterial. It would not be recoverable from the operator. So it's something to consider.
Not for today's discussion, but I would be curious if the hydrogeologist would provide some direction as to where to continue monitoring of this type of data in the future. Because I think for the cost, I think this is quite good information. I guess maybe I'm challenged with the so what aspect of it. Is okay, great, we can continue monitoring this information. But where does it lead us to, type of thing? And I guess maybe I would look for some guidance on that would be my comment. But I appreciate the efforts taken. And I think if there's concerns of residents around water issues, I think it's a responsible process on council to make sure that those concerns are heard and acted upon. That's it.
Ms. Whitebox, can you speak to how long the process took? Because you would have applied for the MOI to the time that you received it, because if we want the information or if something gets raised with a member of the community, there's a delay in getting the information to reaction, so. I think council have that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, after the May meeting, staff did ask Lafarge. Unfortunately, the answer was no to the access. So in July, after that, there was a request made to the ministry for the information. And then we didn't receive it until December 22nd. And that has a lot to do with the process of notifying the third party, and so that it does expand the time. So it did take over 6 months or so to actually get the information.
Just one follow-up. Just curious if a request can be, if the direction is to continue to monitor, to request Lafarge present or provide this information, knowing that if you go through the alternative route, the likelihood of receiving it's just going to be 3 to 4 months after the fact. And if they know we're going to go through the process, maybe as a good corporate citizen, they would just share it without having to do the void process altogether. Just a suggestion.
Mr. Buena?
Yeah, I think to Counselor, personally, I think perhaps knowing now that we can access it anyways through the freedom of information, perhaps they would change their mind and be more willing to share it voluntarily. But barring that, I think that it is good practice to request that information if all else fails through the freedom of information just by default. Because that way, if we do have a resident who's concerned, we've at least gotten, not to say we have to have it peer reviewed every year, but just to have that data available to somebody to point to say, here's the information. And, you know, understanding that it may be a year old or even 2 years old, but at least we have that continuous data coming in, whereas prior to now, we've had nothing. So I think that would just be good practice and a good, I think that the residents would appreciate that there's something for them to look at.
Councilor Spose?
Yes, I echo the comments made by councilors. First, I think it's important to have residents realize that we're working for them on this issue and that we're following up with their concerns. And there is a concern when we can consider asking our hydrogeologist to get into the concern a little bit more depth as we did this time.
Yeah, thank you. My initial comment was that it was unfortunate to hear that the operator wouldn't share the information and that required a freedom of information request to do that. So thanks to staff for pursuing it and getting the information. Like Councillor Boyd has said, perhaps now that they know we can access the information, they may, you know, be a little more willing to offer it. So it won't hurt to ask. Kind of thinking two things here. Hard Environmental determined that there was no year-over-year decline in water levels for 30 years. So I'm just wondering, you know, trying to grab this data. Are we going to see a real change in 1 year, in 2 years, when we've seen 30 years of data where it's been, you know, fairly consistent? So maybe not needing it peer reviewed, but just accessing the data so that if and when there's something of concern, we can then peer review it. Might just be a reasonable way to, you know, deal with the data that we're getting. Because there is still, he does, like, Hardin still does say there is a magnitude of water level change. So there's something, you know, going on that does need to be monitored at some point. So that would just be my comment on there. My final question was, Hardin suggested that we review projects that impact groundwater recharge on the Paris Galt Moraines. And I'm just wondering, when projects are presented to council, is there a way that staff can be flagging these projects so that we know that they are located in the Paris Galt Moraine?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, we've had that discussion with our county planning staff, and so they're gonna work to flag. This already does happen to some degree, and so while they wouldn't necessarily do the review, they would flag it for our ecologist or hydrogeologist just to make sure that they're looking at that a little bit more thoroughly.
Okay, so I wouldn't know, you know, unless. Thank you.
These report that we FOI, was that only for the fiscal year 2020? I mean, just January 21?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I asked for the most recent data that they had through the FOI, so this is what they provided us. So I believe probably at this time of year, we would be able to access the 2021, because I believe we had the 2020. So we're always going to be the year behind in it. So there is probably information that we could, new information that we could get at this point.
So I'd recommend council consider staff reaching out to Lafarge to ask for fiscal year 21 monitoring report. And if they decline, then to FOI 2021 on an ongoing basis. Do those FOIs requests. Maybe council could consider that. Council Hurst. We need a motion for that. Make that motion. Second, comments on that?
Yeah.
All right, so. I think we're okay. Want to read it?
Okay. That report ADM 2023-012 entitled 2020 monitoring report for Lafarge McMillan Pit, the end peer review be received. And the council direct staff to forward the staff report and schedules to Mr. Wayne Lawton, the resident requesting information, and the council direct staff to request that this information be provided by Lafarge voluntarily, and that failing the monitoring data being provided voluntarily, that council direct staff to request this information on an ongoing annual basis through a freedom of information request to the ministry.
Does that capture 21? Like they might assume we on 22 going forward.
We'll make sure to get, because I know we don't have the 21, so we'll make sure to ask for that.
Okay, you guys want for that? Either mover to seconder, correct? Okay, all in favor? Right, that's carried. All right. You're on to correspondence. Sorry. So you have a resolution for 10.1?
The council received correspondence item 10.1, County of Wellington, County Official Plan Review, Progress Report number 8 for information.
Get more for that, please. Suppose seconded by Councillor Hurst. Comments, questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just through the question and answers that one got added to the agenda today. There was an idea presented to ask the county of Wellington to our council meeting to present some information on the agricultural mapping. And I, at least for myself, I have had quite a few residents ask who are in those candidate areas what's involved, what the criteria is, how they can participate in the discussion. So I think it would be very helpful to have the county come and present us to just explain the process and the conservation piece. And so I was hoping that that suggestion would be realized.
I think that is moved by Councillor Glenn. Second by Councillor Spillis. Councillor Hurst.
Supportive. I think it's good suggestion.
I was gonna make the exact motion, so.
Sure you were. You
Well,
thought
she's
it
got
was-
it.
she said something.
No, she's got it right there.
Okay, any comments?
No, I'm good with it. Now, that's important that our residents understand how they can follow this. It could be some big changes.
Councillor Bailey?
Yeah, I'm in support of that. I had asked a question that we need staff to answer anyway. I just wanted to know what this new mixed-use commercial residential designation that was mentioned is. So that would be a good opportunity to ask them that as well.
No. All in favor? First carried. Okay. All right, 10.2. Swipe off your resolution down, please.
Yes. The council receives supports with correspondence item 10.2, County of Wellington Roads Committee Report, Lake Road Reconstruction, Wellington Road 32 Lynch project details and speed limit changes for information.
Move for that, please. Councillor Spillis, seconded by Councillor Hurst. Any questions or comments? Councillor Hurst?
No, I think it's.
Councillor Guida?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I wasn't able to make it to the open house, but it was very well attended and I'm glad for that. And just reading through this, there are some very welcome safety improvements that are happening here. The removal of that slip around turn, I think is a good idea. widening the shoulder, narrowing the road, and also adding the I don't know what they're called, the reptile crossings. I think those are all great features to see. But this roadway has been, we've been hearing all the time about this speeding, and so I'm sure for the residents that live on the west side of that road, it's probably very frustrating for them to see that the speed limit is actually being proposed to be increased. And to a certain extent, I mean, I understand the rationale and appreciate that there's been a significant amount of work that went into developing speed management plan. But having said that, I do think there's some validity to some of the concerns that we read in the report. That if the posted speed limit is 70, drivers will tend to go 10 to 20 above that. And so what I was hoping for is to perhaps see something like what we implemented on Watson Road South in the township, where at the sort of T intersections, we added stop signs, and that has had a positive effect. I mean, they're still speeding, but a driver can't continuously accelerate down the whole stretch because they're forced to come to a stop. And so I was hoping that we could ask the roads committee if they would consider adding three-way stops at the entrance to Irish Creek. I don't know the name of that road, or at Travel Road, or at Gold, just to break up that sort of acceleration piece a little bit, and to possibly report back to council before they make their changes to the speeding guidelines.
I'm not going to take that as a motion yet, because I feel there might be some additions to your motion. I just want to go around the table once, see if there's any additional items, and then we can just do it all as one consideration. Your motions. Mr. Spools?
Yes, I agree with that the west end is a problem. My suggestion was rather than have it go from 70 down to 50, put a transition area, go from 70 to 60 to 50. In other words, give the drivers the opportunity to slow down as they approach our area that a lot of residents use. I understand where Council Gord is coming from, so I'm okay presenting that as a fallback for going after a suggestion where we graduate the speed and reduction.
You could report back on both
Absolutely.
options. Mr. Bailey?
Thank you. Just for clarification, is it posted at 60 currently in the west side? I just wanted to make a comment. I was able to attend the public meeting, and there was a lot of public who came out, and I wanted to thank them for coming, and also thanks to the county staff, because they were really engaged with the public that was there. And I think some of the things that we're seeing in this report is reflective of the conversations that they've had with them. So I think that was a really, really great process with some good collaboration. I'm fully supportive of the Schedule C, so it was really great to see the east side being in the 50, and I think that was part of those conversations with residents. I had asked a question just about the follow-up. It looked like there's going to be some post-construction monitoring regarding this new concrete material, and I was just wondering if there was post-construction monitoring happening with the reptile and amphibian mortality rate, just to know if what's being done is beneficial, which might help us in the future. So I didn't know if we'll be able to get a response from the county, what that's going to look like, and when we would get that response. And my concern was also around the detour route. I had some concerned citizens from Ellis Road. So I just had made a comment in the questions about hoping that we can encourage any trucks not to use Ellis Road. So I was curious what the detour route was going to be and what the signage is going to be for when the construction actually happens.
Maybe Mr. Fowler could speak to what signage, I know you're not representing the county, but when they did the culvert, we had a lengthy closure on Lake Road. there was a detour in place, which I feel would be the same. Was there signage placed at Ellis to indicate that trucks shouldn't be using that road, and how successful was it?
At initial start of construction, we did encounter trucks trying to bypass on Ellis. The county took mitigation measures that included installing more signage, larger signs at the Ellis Town Line intersection, indicating that this was not a truck route. Plus, the township has already identified Ellis Road with signage saying it's no truck route. Proper detours were in place, indicating that traffic had to head north to 34, to the roundabout at 32, and then head back to Lake Road. So I assume, or I predict that the county will have a similar detour route established, and they are cognizant of the fact of having extra signage at Ellis Town Line.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll take what Councillor Goida mentioned, and then capture Councillor Spillis' comments.
I do have one question, just related to Councillor Gorda's comment about adding the three-way stop. I just missed the location where that was.
I think, okay, so, Travel Road and I think the other road's called Sandy Shore Boulevard. I think it is the entrance to Irish Creek. I don't know if anyone.
And just Irish.
Okay.
And then the graduated.
Graduated speed option. And I'm not sure again if that's in a specific location that we should know.
That's from Town Line Road to the residential area. They go from 70 to 50, suggesting that they graduate from 70 to 60, and then finally.
The council receives a correspondence item 10.2, County of Wellington Roads Committee report on Lake Road reconstruction and project details and speed limit changes for information. And that council directs staff to request that the county report to council prior to approving the speed bylaw and comment on the proposal for the addition of a three-way stop at Traveled Road and Sandy Shore Boulevard, and comment on the proposal for a graduated speed option from Town Line Road to the residential area.
I think we have Hoover. Okay, so Hoover, Councillor Goida, second by Councillor Spillis. Any further comments? The reptile thing?
No. What I'm thinking in my head is the proposal of some sort of pilot project. So before, initiating some sort of bylaw, could we have a pilot project? That's like a little window where we can suggest some of these items. Whether we keep the speed at, 50 and see how it goes for 6 months. I don't know where that fits in, but I'm just wondering if somewhere in there we can be suggesting a pilot project. That way we're not putting something in place permanently, we're putting something in place temporary and just seeing how that goes before we make something more permanent. I just don't know where that fits in.
So you could maybe add in that motion that the county consider implementing both or alternating these options as a pilot ahead of adoption of the bylaw.
That would-
So I believe the bylaw is coming back to county roads committee in the fall. Don't quote me. That's just a guess. Talking to you, Jesse. But so I'd like to at least see them in front of us in the next month or two. Because then you need a window, if you're gonna institute, implement a pilot, we need some time ahead of the adoption of the bylaws. So we need to put in there when we do requests, county staff can talk to us about that, but maybe staff could pass on that. Like to see them sooner rather than later. I can do that too.
Just for clarification, it mentioned the west side. Is that what?
That's what we're talking about. The graduates on the west side, we're not,
Does it say it?
through Mr. Chair, I mentioned the specific areas, but I haven't said west side. So I have town line to the town line road to the residential area, and then the three-way stops related to the traveled road, Sandy Shore Boulevard area.
There really isn't anything pilot on the east side of it, because the
No.
speed limit's staying the same, it's just the construction's gonna change, it's gonna narrow it down.
That's, I just wanted to make sure it was just that west side there.
Okay. Good, mover and seconder. Okay, any further comments? Okay, all in favor? It's carried. Ready to-
The council receives the correspondence item 10.3 County of Wellington Planning Report regarding Bill 23 More Homes Built Faster Act, and 10.3.1 Ontario Professional Planners Institute and Weir Folds LLP Annual Seminar on Bill 23 More Homes Built Faster Act for information.
Can I get a mover for that, please? Councilor Hurst, seconded by Councilor Spillis. Any questions or comments on that one? Councilor Spillis?
Just a question about staff. Do they have any concerns? I know this is tailored to Walker or most, but is there anything in here that we should be concerned about? I know we did all kinds of motions with respect to the side. And all seems to be some information.
Swipe ones.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. I think it's all the same similar concerns that council has already raised through previous discussion, but this is a great report and a really great slide deck that staff are going to utilize as we work through our projects related to Bill 23 this year.
Thank you.
That's good.
Yeah, I do have one question. I just, again, I know that this is intended for Walker and Boston, but in not reporting this, due to a couple of, what's with the building bylaw and the site plan bylaw possibly needing to be updated. Is that something that we're gonna experience here as well as we work through Bill 23? Is that something that needs to be added to the work plans, the 124 projects we already have on the go?
So through Mr. Chair, we did update our site plan bylaw in, I think it was July last year, and it was in response to a few changes, mostly with Bill 109. But our solicitors have mentioned that there's nothing really that we need to do in addition, but we can certainly follow up. And then the building bylaw, that might be something that needs further review.
Any further questions or comments? Okay, yeah, all in favor? Carried. And so 10.4 is what box.
Yes, the council received correspondence item 10.4 McMillan Pit 2022 water quality analysis and peer review for information.
You gonna go with that, please? Councilor Hurst, second by Councilor Spillis. Any questions or comments on that one? Councilor Bailey?
Yeah, I just had a follow-up question. It says extraction ceased in 2004. I'm just wondering, do we know or have we seen any sort of rehabilitation plan? For what this property needs?
So through you, Mr. Chair, they will be following the rehab plan on their license. And part of this review is to continually monitor that it's in compliance with that rehab plan. So we can get more information for council if you'd like to see those plans, or we can ask specific questions if there are any.
Okay, so it's not accessible somewhere. We can log on somewhere to see what that plan is.
I don't believe the ministry makes this available, but township has it. So again, they're very large documents that don't scan the greatest, but we can make them.
So I can access it. Okay, thank you.
Sorry. Building on that. This is the original bid, right? And it's been dormant for 18 years. I'm wondering if council has an appetite to contact the Minister of Natural Resources and request a surrender of this license due to the fact that it's been dormant, and in the Aggregate Resource Act, it speaks to aggregate pits being an interim use. The use has been dormant for 18 years. I would like to request the minister to pull the license on this pit to make it an interim use. Obviously, that's not going to go in there, but I'd like it to be part of the public record that we're identifying that they've been sitting on this land for quite a long time. The other component is, I lost my agenda. we recently, it's up 10.6, we have the divisional court decision. As part of that, it states that components of a pit are now going to be classified in the industrial tax rate. It also states that if the area of extraction has been extracted completely, it reverts back to the residential. So there's two components. My understanding would be that extraction part of the property that has now been brought down to whatever amount of meters above the water, but the burns would be captured by this new industrial tax rate. But also, as part of the divisional court ruling upholding the ARV ruling, is that if you use the site and you drive on it and then it would be classified industrial. If you look at the satellite imagery of this pit, it's clear that there's activity on the pit. So my request was, first is that we asked the minister to force the operator to surrender the license because of the 18 years of lack of activity. And B, staff look into consultant or somebody to review this property under the new framework as supported by the divisional court to capture it in the industrial tax rate, because it's still being used for some purposes of air extraction. It may not be extraction, but they're driving on it, they're utilizing it, and that captures it. Because they should be paying more than residential tax rate if it's a support network for their adjacent pits, is where I'm going with that. So I don't know if you can. So I'll maybe say to the clerk, should we, because I brought that up, should we get Councilor Coyle into their pecuniary just to make sure I'm not putting her into a predicament?
I think if this is the discussion that's on the table, then yes.
So I said my piece, I'll go to, I don't know how to deal with this. Should I get council's opinion if they want to discuss it, get it for secretary, and she can declare pecuniary if she feels fit, or pecuniary first?
I think that we should get it on the table first and then allow Councilor Boyd to make a decision as to whether she should.
Okay, thank you. So you've heard my little spiel. I'll just go to Councilor Hurst since you're the first one today.
Yeah, I'm supportive of exploring it. I think it's a good point if it's 18 years and no aggregate activity, and making sure that tax rates applicable to the use. I think there's merit in pursuing communication around that.
Okay, so
I am supportive. I second what Councilor Hurst has made. My comment would be is, how do we know that they finished the gravel extraction out of the pond?
it's not, is that one pond, or I thought it was the one that is.
Well, my concern is, they're holding it on for some reason. Could it be that they're anticipating to do some more extraction? And in that case, then it should be all classified as invested.
Either way, there's, let me pull this in. I have. So Councilor Hurst is moving that I recommended contacting the minister to request that the license be surrendered due to the activity for close to 2 decades, and as the ARA states that aggregate operations are interim use. B, staff look into classifying this property in for a prohibition or.
And then C, good confirmation that they have finished the gravel operation, because if they haven't finished, that bond should be considered operation charge and most of it.
By 73 So that's moved, Councilor Hurst. Seconded, Councilor Lewis. Councilor Gordon, do you want to do, well, hold on, sorry, let her finish typing. Something spelled out too much.
Yes, so I'm going to declare committee on this motion that's on the table. Again, because it is dealing with assessments, and because I have a family member that was a gravel pit in the township, the county of Wellington, I will include myself from any discussion or decision.
Thank you. just pulling up the site plan for this. I'm still comfortable. I may have confused. There's too many pits down there. We've had that conversation, which was relevant. But still, if they're driving around,
Session 2 will be that, so.
but I still like, I was the one where they have the aqua farming. Right, well, you can still see some trails or vehicle paths to the back of the property, so. Like so. Okay, comments. Councillor Hurst, you already, any councillors?
No, I'm good with that.
Councillor Bailey?
Yeah, somewhere in the water quality analysis in here, I don't have it in front of me, but it does say extraction ceased in 2004.
Yes.
So,
But it doesn't say if it went to the full depth of what they're permitted or not, right? So just because they stopped.
Yeah, this is 2004, almost 20 years later. I'm sure the technology is to go deeper. If there is opportunity there to get extra stuff, I'm sure they're gonna go.
got it. Okay. It's funny, I actually have a question further down in my notes regarding ARA surrenders. Have there ever been any in West Lynch? Do we know? There have been.
You, Mr. Chair, we do have some pits that were reverted back to agriculture and local houses on things like that.
So it isn't, it is.
That's how it's quite historical now. Question. Aqua farming. Is that a permitted use under the ARA?
Mr. Chair, I think we'd have to look into that. I'm not sure even what the end use is dictated on the license. That would be important to know what it was intended there at the end of the rehabilitation plan.
Because we're currently going through a process for a use on a aggregate operation that's being partially rehabilitated or it's been extracted. Right, on 34, Badger. And they have a new use on it. This is a new use on a extracted aggregate pit. Are they permitted under the ARA or to continue the aqua farming, do they need to surrender the license to continue the aqua farming? So I don't know,
They should be paid commercial rates.
so, if we're going to, we need to treat everybody equal. I'd like staff to, sure, please.
The council received the correspondence item 10.4 McMillan Pit 2022 water quality analysis report and peer review. And the council directs staff to contact the MNRF to surrender the license for the pit, given that the extraction has ceased since 2004. And the council directs staff to retain a consultant to review the property in relation to the Ontario Divisional Court decision for Municipal Property Assessment Corporation versus County of Wellington decision in order to classify the property assessment in accordance with the decision. And the council directs staff to confirm with the pit operator that the extraction activity has ceased permanently.
So I'm backpedaling on the compared to the divisional court because I misidentified one of these pits. I thought there was more land available, but I definitely want to, I think we should focus on that aqua farming if it's appropriate use in the ARA versus a consultant looking at the divisional court component.
Well, I think the berms are still classified as part of it.
We capture the aqua farming part. What's comfortable now?
Sure. I would consider amending the motion. Councilor Hurst has made that the staff look into the legitimacy of the aqua farming. That's part of the zoning associated with this property.
So to be clear, we're not against farming or aqua farming. We just want to clarify if it's an appropriate use under the extractive zoning. So it should revert back to agricultural or commercial, depending on how they view the aqua farming, but So we had a mover and second for that, okay, Councilor Bailey,
Just a part about retaining a consultant to assess this new. Calling it, the court decision for property assessment, would we not also want to look bigger at other pits and more pits, and where do we don't want to piecemeal it, do we? We want to do more of a across the township type assessment?
and I also more to that on the item.
Yeah.
10.6, so
For this
can
motion?
we leave that in for this specific motion, but then if more information comes out of the next item, you could, staff could make their judgment whether to engage the consultant for that specific property?
Yeah, and we'll be working with the county as well on this rate or taxation assessment component.
Yes.
They're the ones that get it in those details, so.
I'll get into more details on
I'm
that.
fine with the way they would structure the motion with respect to this item, and then we can get into the next item.
Yeah. Did it make it capture anyways?
Absolutely.
Any further comments? All in favor? I think Councilor Boyer, she's abstaining. Right. Next is 10. Right? 10.5? Right. All right, 10.5 is.
The council receives correspondence item 10.5 related to Dufferin Aberfoyle Pit 2 application to request an increased annual tonnage limit.
You move that, please. Councilor Swell, second by Councilor Bailey. Mr. Seer, do you have any direction that you'd like to see from council on this one?
Yes, this isn't a normal request for sure. There's a substantial quantity change there, so so that we can give the right advice to council, I recommend that you refer this to staff to look into the request in detail to see what legislation applies, what steps would be required, the types of information that would be required for council to make a decision on this. So that'd be our recommendation. I think you need some more information to make this.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yes.
Councilor Hurst?
I appreciate the guidance, because in the briefing note, I was a little bit vague with 1 million to 2 million and what the rationale was and how this would impact the timeline of the pit. So I very much appreciate a staff report with additional context for future decision.
What's good? Oh, you're out on this? No, next week.
This one I'm okay.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, I have an agreement. with what's on the table.
I'm good as well.
Councilor Bailey.
Yeah, I just have a question. I know there is some neighbor concerns about water levels. With this, how this pit is affecting the neighboring fire pit, called Big Lake there. So I just want to know in this process where I can be helping this neighbor bring forward some of his concerns. And what he's, been going back and forth with the ministry and with this pit operator. Where does that kind of fit in with this?
I think what we would do as staff when we're preparing this report is we would look at what concerns or issues have been identified at the current operation, current levels, and then what impact the proposed expansion would have on those concerns. On the surface, it would seem the concerns would increase if the tonnage increases, but that might be a little simplistic. We would make sure that the concerns that have been expressed to this point, that they're at least acknowledged and commented on with respect to the proposed change.
So should I suggest the resident share with staff then?
Sure.
Build on that. There was a request for our hydrogeologist to meet with the representative of Dufferin around, I believe it was some sodium transitioning across sites. And that meeting has taken place, from my understanding.
Yes.
And council should be seeing some correspondence from either our Hydro G or Dufferin or both.
Correct.
At some point soon.
Yes.
And part of that was a neighbor concerned about their pond to the east, so. I don't know if you probably can't speak to when we'll see that, but.
Okay.
Okay. So. Just make sure that that's incorporated in this. Any further comments? Okay, all in favor, to approve staff, carried. All right, 10.6.
Council receives of course on his item 10.6, relating to the Ontario Divisional Court decision with MPAC versus County of Wellington decision for information.
All right, move that please. Small second by Councilor Hurst. Okay, so this is a good news report. It's not a report, it's a decision. And from my understanding from Mr. DeHart at the county is that MPAC is going to look at Wellington County. So they appealed the bottom 50 pits. And then all parties involved, they agreed to use 6 as the example pits. So this decision affects all of the 50 pits that were appealed in 2017. And if you read the report, and I highly suggest you do when you have some spare time, it's very clear where things went sideways in my opinion. And what's coming out of this is that more will be captured in the industrial rate. MPAC has been given direction that they cannot use the self-reporting mechanism for taxation solely. And our belief is that those will either disappear entirely or be have a very less significant role in determining their tax classes. Mr. DeHart stated that immediately following the divisional court decision, they were notified by MPAC that they would not be appealing to, I believe it's appeal court or superior appeal court. From this divisional court, there was 15 days for the operators to appeal again, and that was at 5 o'clock on Tuesday of the AF&HR meeting at County of Wellington. That has long expired, so it's our belief that neither party will be appealing this divisional court ruling. MPAC's conversations with Mr. DeHart state that they will focus on implementing the original ARB ruling in Wellington County, which makes sense since we led the charge, and then rolling it out, I believe, to the remainder of the province. Mr. DeHart stated that the assessment values for the rural part of the county are relatively close to what they would like to see, so that's a good capture. To me, the capturing the berms, the industrial, the stockpiling, the roads that use the stockpiling, we're going to see a lot more in that industrial caption area and result in more taxes. Some loose numbers Mr. DeHart has provided are $4 million in back taxes. That includes the provincial school board portion. So we could be looking at, approximately 2 million to the county, maybe if we're lucky, 700,000 to the township in back taxes for 2017 to 2021, I believe. And then going forward. So right now, yeah, we're just the county's in discussions with MPAC on how to implement each of the or the ruling to capture the berms and the things I mentioned before. Mr. Hart did mention that each operator still has the opportunity to appeal. So if we implement the ruling and they feel that it doesn't capture their property properly, they still have that appeal process to say that, well, no, I don't, my berms don't go to the back. I don't know what the example would be, but so if, however we delineate or determine the property, if the operator feels there is some injustice there, they have an opportunity to appeal the way that's implemented. Beyond that, I don't know, Mr. CEO, if I've missed anything that you. No. Okay. So, yes, and back to the McMillan report. So the MPAC will be implementing the decision in Wellington County. So we could just keep our focus on it, ensure that pits that have been dormant for 18 years are reviewed as well. Captured properly, not likely need to be consulted, so. And if it's overlooked, then we can maybe take some action. That's the last point. That's one thing that Cynthia Keel, she was the lawyer, she did an excellent job. She mentioned that it's likely going to be on the municipality to bring awareness to MPAC site changes. I don't know if MPAC's gonna have the ability to capture every operations changes year to year. So that was just a bit of a warning that we still have to be invested in the accuracy. What that will translate to, I'm not 100% sure. It's in the ruling, it states, you know, that MPAC cannot solely what's the wording, like solely rely on the self-reporting within their resources. So there's a little bit of area there to wiggle that. Well, does that mean they have to up resource, or do they only have to use their current resources? But until Wellington County and MPAC sort out the details, I'm just wait and see. I believe that's all of it. So I'll take some questions if anybody has any.
Yes, with respect to this ruling, you mentioned that the individual pit operators have a right to appeal. So are you saying the award that we won is still in limbo?
No, it's not. It's just how they implement it. So maybe here's an example. So say you had an operation and it was, by the satellite imagery, it was completely brown stockpiles. And then there was trails in the back. And we captured the whole property. Maybe an operator could appeal and say, well, no, only the front 2/3 is being used. Those back trails haven't been used in 8 years. It's just historic damage or something along those lines. So they can only appeal how we apply it. They can't change how it's or the rules that will apply it. So it's very site specific to the implementation of the ruling.
Okay, so then the back third that you mentioned, will they be agricultural?
In the ruling, it states that any area that is in the extracted zone that has been fully extracted reverts to the residential tax rate. So if they don't have a below the water table license, even though there's aggregate available below the water table, if they've extracted to a meter above, which is their license, then that area would return to the residential. The berms would stay, just that area. We were hoping that it would stay in the industrial and they'd have to put the topsoil back on, but that wasn't, we weren't successful on that component. So,
Fortunately, capital residential. on water.
so.
Okay, thank you.
Figure that out. You can have a floating house.
Figure that out. You know, for floating.
Yeah.
So, just for clarification, does MPAC have access to site plans? Do you know that?
I don't know. I believe if they don't, they'd have to FOI on with it. They determined the taxation in the past by those self-reporting, but they would just, the operator would state the acreage that they disturbed or using, and it's pretty clear that the self-reporting was very self-serving. And the self-reporting tool that MPAC was using was not supported by legislation. So they weren't permitted to basically delegate that component of assessment to someone else. And that's what's in the report. It holds MPAC very accountable. So
I guess I just had a question in terms of the time frame for finding out, is this gonna sort of just trickle in over the next few years, or will we know for next year's budget what's coming in? Do we know anything about that?
I'm not sure when they happen. I believe it all is dependent on how quickly MPAC can implement it across Wellington County. We've been told this priority. That would be a great question for our treasurer at the county. sure if we requested he would attend, he would probably virtually and answer more detailed questions, likely closed. There's still some outstanding issues that can't be discussed as far as I know in open, but we couldn't request him to come down. He's only been working on the file for 20 years. He doesn't mind talking about it. Any further questions?
I just want to make a comment, like to express our appreciation to you, Mr. Mayor, for taking on Atmel and moving this item forward to making it's something that's been a thorn in our side for a long time and getting something out of it finally.
Yeah, it's, you know, Tamel's been a supportive role. I watched some of the original ARB ruling and Cynthia Keel did an amazing job. It was very impressive how thorough and just the way she was very, I'd call it analytical, but it's very linear, just step by step by step. And this decision here, provisional court decision, there's one component where they're talking about Wellington County's position. And the divisional court, all they put was, we agree. I laughed, because normally it's like, well, we interpret it the same, and you know, like one of this big explanation was, we agree. And it's a very easy read. There's two components where you know, it gets wordy, but beyond that, it just shows how great of a job the lawyers did, how Kenda Hart County, and thank you for your kind words. I was glad to be able to provide a support network and raise awareness across the province, and there's more work to be done, and we're going to keep going, and I'll speak to it in the council reports about latest TAPMO meetings, but there's going to be some, you know, communication coming out from TAPMO, recognizing the work of the county and the heart and. All right. Good. So we'll receive that information in a second. Okay, so all in favor? It's carried. I need to take a break. We take a 10-minute break. Reconvene at 12:54, 12:55, sorry, 11:55. All right, welcome back. I believe we're on to council reports. Is that correct? That's right, folks. Right. Just update council. I drove to Stratford to meet with MPP Ray. This was out of the Roma conference. I'm not sure if I mentioned that last time or not. I don't believe I did, but at the time I took the divisional court decision to Mr. Ray and just wanted to provide it to him for information and speak at a high level, some of our concerns around aggregate in the county. And it's interesting because I said to him, I said, you have to excuse my ignorance, but I'm not sure how much of our county you represent. That's when he told me, well, geographically half, and I was surprised. So I also stated that with MPP Arnott being the Speaker of the House, he's not part of caucus, he's not permitted to speak on the House floor. I said that, you know, things that affect the aggregate industry around taxation affect his taxpayers that he represents in the northern part of Wellington County. And I said, you know, we might appreciate a voice at Queen's Park as half of our representation. So he was receptive of that. It was a fairly brief meeting, but it was more of an introductory high level and by the divisional court for him to read and to educate himself. I can't read my own writing. So we had a TAPMO meeting yesterday and welcomed, it was the first meeting with some new members of the executive, a couple, forget where their mayor's of, but we elected Matthew Balmer as member at large at TAPMO, so he's going to be helping with TAPMO and represent us. I think that's a great addition. Everybody's a great addition to the executive, but Matthew, as everyone's aware here, has quite an extensive knowledge on aggregate licensing history. So And sometimes when I get off the rails, he can bring me back in. So that's a great addition to the team. We also have a executive meeting booked on Monday down at the Ontario Sandstone and Gravel Association. We have a common agenda that was put together. And I could probably pull that up. And I asked the CAO for some staff support. Wellington County is doing the majority of the admin. Kim Forrest is doing a fantastic job. She's revamped how the agendas look and booking meetings, things like that. But I wanted to have a staff member attend with me to capture minutes. Because I'm usually too busy talking and scheming to capture it well. And the CAO has been gracious enough, and I don't know if he queried somebody or told them, I'm not sure of that process, but I believe it's Hillary is going to be joining me. And from my understanding, she's excited to go. So she's gonna join me down on Monday at noon for this meeting. And the topics that we loosely agreed on to discuss are excess soil and fill trucks, First Nations, provincial levy, MNRF enforcement, and they just have a catch-all for other. And the idea is that we have some common ground that we can approach the appropriate ministry with for some asks. And it's been quite a few years since we've met between new executive and then COVID hit. And other circumstances around aggregate that yeah, so it's going to be good to get back together and meet. And I believe, oh, there, now I know this. And lastly, so switching gears from aggregate, I'm hoping council can support this, but I've been reaching out to the mayor of Cambridge. And I asked her for a meeting just again at a high level to discuss if there's any potential growth that we can coordinate and work together on. I don't know their growth situation. And I don't know if there's even a possibility for us to work together on something. So she has agreed to the meeting. It's kind of ridiculous. I think it ended up being end of March, took a month to get both of our schedules to work together because everybody's so busy. But unless council has objections to myself going over and just meeting with the mayor of Cambridge, I think it's good just to converse with our neighboring municipalities. I haven't in the first term, to be honest with you. Saw the deputy mayor a couple of times at Sunrise, or a councillor would come at Sunrise. Councillor Gordon and I would see them, but nothing between the two of us. So I believe that's all I have for update.
Question,
Councillor Bailey?
just a question regarding your TAPMO meetings. Are the minutes available somewhere for us to?
Yes, we should be able to provide those. Kim takes minutes. The minutes are not captured verbatim. So it's very generalized, but you can definitely.
Posted to the website.
That's a great question. I would suspect so, but I haven't followed up on that if it happens or not, but I don't see why they wouldn't. We went into closed, so our closed session minutes are not obviously, but I'm sure the open ones are.
There's a quick suggestion for your meeting with the mayor Kim. You may want to pursue access to Post's Lake through GRCA.
Remember that?
Just the other item for the Cambridge meeting would be just an acknowledgement of fire service agreement and the path for the council directed in terms of the cost share. It'd be important to let them the direction taken on that.
Provide that too. Before I go. I'll let you know.
to follow up with Councillor Wilson's suggestion. I believe one of the counselors on the Cambridge council is a GRCA member, board member.
I believe so, as is, Mayor White, chair. This is the ongoing saga of trying to get access to Portsmouth Lake, perhaps Cambridge has a greater population, have a bigger club to twist GRCA to do something with their problem.
I have an announcement if you're going around asking. I'm not sure.
Would announcements be more appropriate under announcements? Which is,
Oh,
or sorry, yeah, there's either number 13 or new business.
yeah, I guess it's from State Communities Committee, so it's a report, I guess.
Yeah, you can do that. Okay. All right, so any further questions for me? Read the resolution. Or is it all encompassing?
There's two all the same.
Okay, perfect. All right, anybody? Oh, Councilor Bailey, go.
I just wanted to let everyone know, right now we're having, the VON fitness classes. I don't know if I mentioned this the last time, but I got confirmation from VON. They now run classes 4 days a week at Duff's Church. So it's Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, which is fantastic there. And they're going to be starting in March, looks like next week, Tuesdays and Thursdays in Mini Lakes. And there's already over 30 people registered for that class. So just in the last few years, we've doubled, the classes, and now we've got a lot more. And this is all fantastic for just fall prevention and, trying to keep seniors healthy and out of hospital. So it's good news.
VON, Victoria Order of Nurses.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's free program.
Portion like who's paying for this service?
It's free to residents.
No, I mean, is the county paying the VON?
It's through VON. So I don't know what funding they get, if there's any provincial funding, but it's,
Are they volunteers as well? Maybe, or?
Yep. Yeah.
So I'd assume that Duff's provides the space.
yeah, I guess they have an agreement. Yeah, it took a bit to come into Mini Lakes and then get permission to use their, their facility in there.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get back to the motion we made at council that religious organizations that they're providing a community service. They are applying for grants, I don't know, about the churches. Sponsoring the VON and paying for their pocket or wherever the case may be.
Yeah.
You can take that back to the VON if you have contact.
And ask them to start charging.
No.
Where are you going
They
with
might be
this?
eligible for a grant. Unless they apply. That's what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't expressed a need, so, right, yeah.
No, that's fine. I'll just,
You
more
can
we
sign
help
up,
all
John.
the seniors like me, I'm way better off.
You can sign up. You fit the age category.
I'll keep it.
All right. Anything further, Councilor Bailey? Nope. Councilor Boyden?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I'm on the Friends of Mill Creek Committee, and they had a meeting just this past month, and that group, first of all, is very valuable to our community and the work that they do, and especially the ranger program is super valuable. They are really struggling with members right now because a lot of the members that have been doing a lot of the work up until now have either moved on or aren't members anymore. So there's a lot of background work that's involved in that group and executing the ranger program. And as a group, they're not exactly sure how to carry on the membership that they currently have. So if you know of anyone or if you hear of anyone that has any interest in that involved, I think that group can really benefit from some new membership, some new ideas too. So.
Question for you. You may not be able to answer this. Is there a minimum age they prefer, or so where I'm thinking is maybe a presentation at Aberfoyle School for the grade 7 and 8s? we want to volunteer.
Also, that's something I could suggest. The Ranger program itself runs somewhat separately from just the group, like our monthly meetings is to discuss a whole range of things, but also the Ranger program is part of that, which is a separate sort of application process. But it's not to say that, you know, students from the school can come to the meeting with their ideas.
Sorry, so I maybe misunderstood there. There may be challenges with Rangers, but there's more challenges with the actual executive or board. kind of-
Exactly, yeah, I don't necessarily think that there is a challenge getting, you know, members or people to be part of the Ranger program. It's getting members to be able to offer the Ranger program. That is the challenge, because there's a lot of fundraising involved, there's a lot of community engagement involved. Finding the place where we're gonna run the Ranger program, and all of that, there's a lot of work, and there's very few people to do it.
Do you have an online Facebook group or something that we can share? Do they advertise the
There is
need
a
for members?
website,
Okay.
like a Friends of Health group website, but there isn't a social media page. And again, it's just that there's just no one to run.
Yeah. I would just be willing to share the notice that says, hey, looking for members, but I would need something to share.
So I'll take that back for
Yeah.
our next meeting, and possibly we can put out some kind of, even if it's not social media, like something brochure or something.
Maybe you could take it to the Mill Creek Stewards. You know, they're focused primarily on area concerns, but they have quite a network of folks down there. They may be interested or think that may join. So John McLean is
Yeah.
a good contact. Right.
If I may, it may also be something that we could add to our youth advisory committee agenda, just with that group of kids, and it may be outreach through that program as well.
Depending on the age. Yeah, depending on the age of.
What's that next meeting?
Next Monday.
What I'll do is I'll reach out to Don McKay, who is the chair of that. Group, and just get him to coordinate that.
Excellent. Won't steal anything, Jess.
You should be able to-
All right, perfect. Can you read that resolution, please?
The council receives the mayor and council member updates for information.
Can you work that, please? Mr. Willis, second by Councilor Hurst, all in favor? All right, that's carried. Bylaws, Ms. White Fox. Then, yes. Which one's the first one? Okay, yes, do you want to speak to 12.1.1?
Yes, certainly, Mr. Chair. So just for council, just in response to our delegation that we heard earlier today. Our first bylaw is to appoint an integrity commissioner. So I suppose just the first thing to point out is there was some mention of discussion that took place in closed meeting during the delegation. So just really important to just confirm that staff and council are not able to talk about or confirm or deny what was discussed in a closed meeting. It's confidential. So I think that's just really important to talk about first. So that is, we do go into closed under section 239 of the Municipal Act for purposes that are approved under that section of the act. So just again, I know it was alluded to during the delegation, just making that very clear that we're not able to confirm or deny anything that was talked about in closed. Secondly, and perhaps a point that could offer some clarity with the bylaw that our delegation has mentioned as well is just the date that the bylaw is intended to come into full force and effect. So I think there is a slight amendment that we could make to the bylaw just in relation to the point that the delegation made. So I've added a line subject to council approval that this bylaw shall come into full force and effect effective March 10th, 2023. So again, just talking a little bit about our notification process with our current integrity commissioner. Our contract does require us to give 30 days notice, either party, to end the agreement. And so we did give that notice on February the 9th. And our integrity commissioner was notified that his appointment would end on March the 9th, March the 10th, around that time when we were appointing our new integrity commissioner. So that information was shared and certainly was the intent of staff all along. We was never intended that there would be a period of 9 days where we would be left without integrity commissioner. We do realize that we are legislated to have an integrity commissioner, so of course that was always the intent of the municipality. So I think just adding that little bit of clarity to the bylaw will help address the concerns raised by Mr. Giorno. And I do have it available just for viewing on the screen if you'd like to see it, but it's just a line at the bottom that says this bylaw shall come into full force and effect March 10th, 2023.
So you want to read the resolution?
Certainly, and sorry, one other point as well. Sorry, I'm just reading my notes here, but we did receive some correspondence from Mr. Giorno, as he mentioned in his delegation, and staff worked together with our township solicitor on the points that were raised. They were the same points that were raised during the verbal delegation here today. So just to set the mind at ease for council in the township, a lot of that discussion that happened during the delegation, staff actually did have that discussion with our township solicitor, and we are proceeding as in accordance with his direction in terms of bringing the bylaw forward to you today.
Right, you want to read the resolution, please?
Sure. That the following bylaws be taken as read 3 times and finally passed into the council. Bylaw 2023-013 being a bylaw to appoint integrity commissioner for the township of Pleasant. And bylaw 2023-014 being a bylaw to appoint a heritage advisory committee member, which repeals bylaw 2023-0.
First bylaw, does that say as amended?
Sure, yes, absolutely, sorry. Mr. Chair, as amended.
Take a mover for that, please. Councilor Lewis, seconder. Councilor Hurst, any comments on the integrity commissioner bylaw?
I have concerns. I really don't feel comfortable not knowing the answers that our legal counsel provided in response to the comments that Mr. Giorno has made. I want to be above board, and if there's any doubt about the place.
Can you speak to which comments made that are concerning to you? Is it the transparency?
It's a transparency.
Mr. CO, did you want to speak to that?
So what you spoke with our solicitor on that, do you want to maybe speak to that aspect of it?
And in terms of transparency, could you just elaborate a little bit more, which part of the
Well,
process?
the concern is that we were not transparent in our process. We did not give him the opportunity to explain why he was no longer, services were no longer required. The fact that we did not advise our residents that we did follow this process.
If we are utilizing, say, I mean, I know the delegation mentioned an officer, but if we change consultants or other people that are under contract or through bylaw, do we consult the public? So is there any rationale that we would consult the public in a different process for this situation versus other?
And neither with respect to a officer of the corporation, for example, when you change the treasurer or the clerk or CEO or fire chief or anything like that, you don't go through public consultation application process.
Does that help? So ultimately, staff feel this is the direction to go.
After following or consulting with our solicitor and following the advice that he provided us, yes.
I would like to understand what the impact of deferring this bylaw, adopting this bylaw until our next council meeting. Just understanding what is that something that's possible? What is the impact of that? Just if any of us need more comfort in making a decision, we defer it, is that detrimental?
Is that based on the delegation comments that there was a window of coverage that we wouldn't be in compliance with the municipal act? Or what's the concerns that you're raising to wanting to defer?
The delegate spoke to having the opportunity to respond, and I don't know if that's, I don't know the legislation, so I don't know if that's something that's legislated or something that was done.
The delegate was given 30 days notice, which would have covered our previous meeting. No.
Sorry,
Was he notified ahead of our previous meeting?
I was notified on February the 9th, our meeting,
Yeah, March 8th meeting.
February.
So that's 30 days there. You have an opportunity to delegate. Mr. CAO. Is there anything? Mr. CAO, you're committed to hiring the new integrity commission. So there was opportunity for comment. Whether it was missed, whether full ramifications of the change have been more understood, I don't know, but there was opportunity. And the concern of gapping of lack of integrity commissioner been addressed by staff. My original copy says the new one.
Contract, our appointment would start.
That gapping has been addressed, so be in compliance. The component of being transparent to the public may be of opinion to delegates, but we don't go and ask, we didn't go and ask the public if we want to hire the CAO. It's a decision of council, and there was notice given to the delegate with this opportunity, so. Beyond that, like, is there any other concerns that haven't been addressed in what we've discussed so far?
No, my question was just if we were to defer, but that's fine. I'll make it.
My last. Does staff have any concerns by approving this bylaw today?
Not following the legal advice we received when we reviewed it in detail with our solicitor. No, we had no concerns.
First, any comments or questions?
That was the question I was looking for, was does staff feel that they've gone through the appropriate processes in undertaking this decision? And if that answer, based on what I'm hearing, is yes, then I'm comfortable with it.
Yeah.
Questions?
I'm just gonna caution you, and I would have if it was somebody else, just be cognizant of what you can and cannot speak of. Don't disclose anything from the post. So,
No.
okay.
Yeah, I just don't remember having a discussion today. The delegate mentioned his fee. And I don't remember us having a discussion around fee. I don't know if I can ask any information about the new new appointed versus the old and the impacts on them.
In terms of the fee, I can speak to that under our procurement requirements. There are processes that are established based on the overall expenditure when we're to go out to a public tender, issue RFPs and all that kind of thing. What we did at the staff is we took a look at the average annual expenditures that we've done, because there's no set work plan, because this individual is only consulted when a particular issue comes up. And the quantity, or the amount of money that is spent on an average basis annually is far below where that threshold is released. threshold is reached. So the provisions within the procurement requirements that we have put it at the discretion of staff based on number of factors and to seek a qualified individual and in their opinion, qualified individual to perform the requested duties. So that's what we did, and it's in full compliance with the council procurement process.
And I want to build on that a bit. And I'm not saying this is the case, but you don't choose who you hire strictly based on the monetary component of your services. So even consultants for area reviews and things like that, they might not necessarily go with the lowest fee just because it's the lowest fee. And I'm not saying there was a lack of service wasn't professional quality service. I'm just saying that bring that into the equation. I mean, you can't discuss too much with CEO, but it wasn't likely the only criteria. There have been other components, right?
But in other situations, it's a factor that is. In other situations, like when we're going up to tender, it is a factor that is considered. So that was just part of what I heard this morning.
Yeah, I can speak to that. Depending on the nature of services, there's different requirements. For example, if it's a construction contract to build a parking lot or playground, as long as they meet minimum specifications, it does go to lowest bid. But if, for example, we're hiring a architect to design a building park, there's a scoring matrix where it's project experience, project team, and cost. And cost is a component of it. It's not the driving factor like it is typically for a tender. It's a component that's considered, but it's not the same.
And then the other thing I heard this morning was that the current contract, I call it that, agreement, was to go till April. So my question is, does staff have any issue with this coming in effect? Whatever the last day of April, the date in April that this current contract is.
Through
Set.
Mr. Chair. No, that's a good point, and we did discuss it with us internally. It's very important that we get some training for our committees and council. We have brand new committees, members of council that need to have training on conflict of interest. And so staff's opinion is that it's most appropriate to have the incoming integrity commissioner do that training rather than an outgoing integrity commissioner. And so delaying the training until the end of April, when our contract with our current integrity commissioner gives us the ability to end the agreement at any time with 30 days notice. Staff felt that it was prudent to get this our incoming integrity commissioner in place as soon as possible to facilitate that training.
Okay, so for clarification, the training is different every term depending. Or is it a consistent training protocol every 4 years?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the training is offered by the integrity commissioner, so that's going to look different based on the integrity commissioner that you have. They develop it, I'm assuming, and so it is something that needs to happen each term with the new term. So we're looking at doing that hopefully sometime in March, beginning of April, just to make sure that particularly our brand new committees that are making decisions on things, they have no conflict of interest at this time. So it is a very important piece that we are looking to get done sooner rather than later.
So basically you want the person that's going to be applying conflict of interest act doing the training. You don't want that
It's
separated.
most appropriate to have our current integrity commissioner that's going to be with us this term to do that training.
Sorry, can you just confirm what you've added to the bylaw then?
What I've added is a line that this bylaw shall come into full force and effect March 10th, 2023.
More questions? Thank you.
All in favor? Very good. I didn't see your hand. Okay. All right, announcements, any announcements from council?
Mr. Mayor, I think we have another,
They were both in there, were they not? Okay,
As long as that's all right, I read them both together.
there, thank you.
I can revisit it.
No, that's fine. I'll never do accept.
Okay, so announcements. Announcements. Oh,
I'm just happy that we're gonna have our first Heritage Advisory Committee meeting next week, March 6th, with a full slate of new committee members. So looking forward to our first report there.
Great, we're gonna be busy. All right, I believe we're going into closed session now.
So the council go into closed session under section 239 of the Municipal Act for the purpose of a confidential report prepared by Kevin Thompson, SB Law, regarding advice that is subject to solicited client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. And this is regarding the Ontario Land Tribunal matter. Confidential report prepared by Eric Davis from SB Law regarding advice that is subject to solicitor client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, and regarding the security of the property of the municipality or local board. And this is in relation to township lands. And finally, a confidential report regarding personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, and this is in respect to the volunteer of the year award nominations.
You move for that, please. Councillor Bailey, seconded. Councillor Goida, all in favor? Very good. Very close. All right, Ms. White, you have some resolutions for us?
Yes, the council moves into open session at 3:16 p.m.
I am moving a second for that, please. Councillor Hurst, Councillor Bailey, all in favor? Very, so the switch box.
The council receives a confidential report prepared by Kevin Thompson from SB Law regarding advice that is subject to solicitor client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, and this is related to Ontario Land Tribunal matter. Confidential report prepared by Eric Davis, SB Law, regarding advice that is subject to solicitor client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, and regarding the security of the property of the municipality or local board, and this is relating to township lands. And a confidential report regarding personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, and this is related to volunteer of the year award nominations, and that staff proceed as directed.
You move for that. Councillor Bailey, seconded by Councillor Hurst. All in favor? Carried. Last one. Any business arising from the closed session? Any notice of motion? New business. This might be new business. So can staff consider inviting the recipient of any volunteer awards, that being the senior, I think the senior and just volunteer, to the appreciation night, as a way of also recognizing them, their contributions to the community, and something I just thought of. That's appropriate under new business, but so. Anything else, anybody else with new business? Perpetuary bylaw, please.
The following bylaw be taken as read 3 times and finally passed in the council. Bylaw 2023-015 being the bylaw that permanent proceedings in council for the corporation of the township of Clifton at its meeting held on the first day of March 2023.
Mover for that, please. Councillor Hurst, second by Councillor Lewis, all in favor? It's carried. And adjournment.
Council hereby adjourns at 3:19 p.m.
Mover for that, please. Councillor Hurst. Lewis, all in favor? Bailey in favor. Carried. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.